They left a dead puppy at a campout, but a stray cat did the unthinkable. The ginger cat, a seasoned survivor named Rusty by some of the park rangers who occasionally left out scraps, stretched languidly. His orange fur caught the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. He was perched on a large, moss-covered rock overlooking a clearing in the heart of the Manila National Forest in West Virginia. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and dampish earth, a familiar comfort to the solitary feline. This part of the forest, bordering a small, quiet town named Havenwood, was his territory. He knew every hidden burrow, every bird's nest, and every place where a careless picnicker might leave behind a dropped morsel. Yesterday, the clearing had been alive with the sounds of laughter and the aroma of grilling meat. A local church, Havenwood Community Chapel, had held its annual summer picnic. Rusty had watched from a distance, his amber eyes narrowed, calculating the potential for leftovers. He had learned to be patient, to wait for the humans to leave before venturing closer. Now, all that remained were the telltale signs: flattened grass, discarded paper plates, and napkins fluttering in the breeze. The tantalizing scent of cooked hot dogs and hamburgers still clung to the air. Rusty hopped down from the rock, his movements fluid and silent. He began his usual routine, sniffing around the perimeter of the clearing, his whiskers twitching. He found a half-eaten hot dog bun, a few stray potato chips, and a small piece of fried chicken, which he devoured quickly. It wasn't a feast, but it was enough to take the edge off his hunger. He was about to move on to explore another part of his territory when he heard a whimper. It was a faint, pathetic sound coming from the deeper woods beyond the clearing. Rusty paused, his ears pricked. He recognized the sound, a young animal in distress. His initial instinct was to ignore it. He had no time for weaklings. Survival in the wild demanded self-reliance, but the whimpering continued, growing more desperate. Curiosity, and perhaps a faint stirring of something he hadn't felt in a long time, prompted him to investigate. He moved cautiously into the thicker undergrowth, his body low to the ground. The scent of the young animal became stronger. A dog. A young one at that. He rounded a thicket of rhododendron and saw it. A German shepherd puppy, no more than a few months old, tangled in a thorny vine. Its coat, meant to be a rich black and tan, was matted with mud and leaves. Its eyes were wide with fear and confusion. The puppy struggled weakly, its whimpers turning into yelps of pain as the thorns dug into its skin. It was clearly lost, separated from its owner, and utterly helpless. Rusty watched for a moment, his expression unreadable. He could easily walk away. The puppy was not his concern. It was just another casualty of the wilderness, a testament to the harsh realities of survival. But something held him back. Perhaps it was the puppy's utter vulnerability, the way it looked at him with a mixture of fear and pleading. Perhaps it was a flicker of memory, a ghost of his own kittenhood, long before he'd become the hardened survivor he was today. He couldn't explain it, but he couldn't simply leave. He approached the puppy cautiously, making a soft, chirping sound, a sound he hadn't used since he was a kitten. The puppy stopped struggling and looked at him, its tail giving a tentative wag. Rusty carefully nudged the vine, using his paw to gently pull it away from the puppy's leg. The puppy yelped again, but it seemed to understand that Rusty was trying to help. Once the puppy was free, it collapsed onto the ground, exhausted. It licked Rusty's paw tentatively, a gesture of gratitude. Rusty recoiled slightly, unused to such displays of affection. He looked around, scanning the woods. There was no sign of the puppy's owner, no scent of humans nearby. The puppy had clearly been lost for some time. The sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees. The air grew colder. The puppy shivered, pressing itself against Rusty's side. Rusty, despite his usual preference for solitude, didn't move away. He felt the puppy's thin body trembling, heard its soft, whimpering breaths. He knew that the puppy wouldn't survive the night alone. He looked back toward the clearing, toward the faint lights of Havenwood in the distance. He knew the dangers of the human world, cars, unfriendly dogs, and people who didn't like stray cats. But he also knew that the puppy had no chance in the wilderness. A decision formed in his mind, a decision that surprised even him. He would lead the puppy toward the town, toward the possibility of help. It was a risk, but it was a risk he was unexpectedly willing to take. A sense of accomplishment, a flicker of pride, and a growing unease settled over him. He was a loner, accustomed to relying only on himself. This newfound connection with Shep and now with Sarah was unsettling. Rusty had spent most of his life avoiding attachments, relying solely on his instincts and wit to survive. Yet, here he was, drawn to the quiet warmth of Sarah's home, watching as she nursed the injured puppy back to health. Over the next few days, a routine established itself. Sarah cared for Shep with unwavering dedication. She fed him small, regular meals, gradually increasing the portions as his strength returned. She gave him medication for the worms she had discovered and applied antiseptic cream to the sores on his paws. Each day she took him for short walks in the yard, careful not to overexert him. Though still weak, he eagerly followed her, his tail wagging at even the smallest gesture of affection. Rusty remained a constant presence, though he kept his distance. He spent most of his time in Sarah's garden, hiding among the flowers and bushes. At first he was wary, uncertain of this new arrangement, but the food Sarah left for him each morning and evening was impossible to resist. The dry kibble and canned tuna were a feast compared to the scraps he scavenged from trash bins. He ate cautiously, always alert, yet each day he found himself growing a little more comfortable. Sarah's patience extended beyond Shep. She never forced herself upon Rusty, never tried to push him into the house or cage him in. Instead, she let him set the pace. He allowed her to come closer, even to stroke his fur briefly before slipping away. He would never be a house cat, never one to lounge on a windowsill without a care in the world. But he had found something here, security, comfort, something resembling home. Shep, meanwhile, was thriving. His coat began to regain its shine, his eyes brightened, and his body grew stronger with each passing day. Though still clumsy on his paws, his energy returned in bursts of playful enthusiasm. He followed Sarah around the house, always at her heels, eager for her attention. He tried to engage Rusty in play, pouncing and yipping excitedly, but the cat usually responded with a hiss and a swat, as if to remind the puppy of his place. Despite Rusty's attempts to remain detached, something was shifting between them. At night, when the house was quiet, they would often curl up in the same patch of sunlight on the porch. Shep would rest his head against Rusty's side, and though the cat never openly encouraged it, he didn't pull away either. Perhaps it was the warmth, or perhaps it was something deeper, an unspoken understanding between two creatures who had survived hardship together. Sarah watched them with quiet satisfaction. She had given them a sanctuary, even if only a temporary one. Yet she knew deep down that Shep could not stay with her forever. As much as she adored him, she was not equipped to care for a growing German shepherd. He needed space to run, someone who could keep up with his boundless energy. She put up posters around town, at the grocery store, the post office, the veterinary clinic, hoping someone would recognize him. She called the local animal shelter, checked lost pet listings, but no one had come forward. As the days passed, her hope dwindled. She began to consider other options, thinking of finding him a permanent home. One evening, as she sat on the porch watching Shep chase a butterfly across the yard, she felt a pang of sadness. She had grown attached to him, to his joyful spirit, to the way he had brought life back into her quiet world. The thought of letting him go filled her with a deep sense of loss, but she knew it was the right thing to do. Then, a week later, her grandson Michael came to visit. He was a tall, broad-shouldered young man with a kind smile and gentle eyes that reminded Sarah of her late husband. He lived on a small farm about an hour outside of Havenwood, raising chickens and sheep. As soon as he stepped into the living room, Shep bounded toward him, tail wagging furiously. Michael laughed, crouching down to pet the puppy. "Well, hello there, fella," he said. "Grandma, where did you find this little guy?" Sarah told him the story, how Shep and Rusty had arrived at her doorstep, their journey from the woods, the bond they had formed. Michael listened intently, his expression softening. He continued to pet Shep, who now licked his face enthusiastically. "He's a beautiful dog, Grandma," Michael said. "A German Shepherd, right?" "Yes," Sarah replied. "I've been trying to find his owners, but no one has come forward. I think he was abandoned." Michael looked at Shep, his eyes filled with compassion. He had always wanted a dog, but his busy life on the farm had made it difficult to commit. Still, the more time he spent with Shep, the more he felt a connection. By the end of the afternoon, as he sat with Sarah on the porch, Shep resting at his feet, she finally asked, "Michael, would you consider taking him?" Michael hesitated, then smiled. "I've always wanted a dog. I have plenty of space on the farm. He'd be good company, and he could help keep an eye on the livestock." Sarah nodded, forcing a smile. She knew it was the right decision, but it didn't make it any easier. The next morning, as Michael prepared to leave, Shep whined, looking from Sarah to Rusty, sensing something was changing. Rusty sat on the porch, his amber eyes unreadable, but Sarah thought she detected a flicker of sadness. As the truck pulled away, Shep let out a soft bark, a goodbye. Rusty didn't move. He simply watched, silent and still. Sarah put her hand on Rusty's back. "He'll be all right," she whispered. Rusty didn't purr. He didn't nuzzle into her hand, but he didn't pull away either. He simply sat there accepting the loss.